Welcome back, everyone, to another episode of Tabletopped. And today we are boldly going where no podcast has gone before, because I have two amazing TTRPG designers and writers, and you might be familiar with some of their work because they worked on Star Trek Adventures. And of course, we have them here to talk about game design, but I'll let them introduce themselves as well. We have Spader and Michael Dismuke. I'm so excited to talk to you guys. So tell us a little bit about what your background is. What should people know you for?
Michael, why don't you go first?
Okay. Well, I hope people will always remember me for Star Trek. So that's projecting into the future. Michael Dismuke, michaeldismuke.com. Of course, if you want to see the variety of work I've had the privilege to be involved with. I work in communications as my day job. And then in 2018, I started a blog that became very popular, focusing on Star Trek Adventures, the RPG game. I was writing so much that they noticed me and came and picked me out of the crowd. Jim Johnson, who's the project manager, and 20 plus modules, mission briefs later, I'm solid doing that, and actually starting to do other stuff like being able to work with Al on Sentience. I'm sure he's going to talk about that amazing RPG. To me, actually, my second favorite RPG in the universe right now. And some others like Mysteries and Mayhem, Ashland, and stuff I can't talk about yet because I'm on NDA. But I've been doing some fiction writing for Star Trek 2, Star Trek Explorer magazine, and some other cool stuff coming out over the next couple of years.
That's right.
Amazing.
Yeah, and so I'm Al Spader, by the way. I'm a writer for Star Trek Adventures as well. I was lead writer on the Federation Klingon War tactical campaign, which was like a self-generating, almost like board game experience that you play along with a role-playing game. I'm also the writer of Sentience, which is a 2D20 game that just finished its Kickstarter. We were way more successful than I was expecting, so that was awesome. And I got into, I used to write D&D stuff back when Adventures League first started, back when they were doing the community created content for conventions. Yeah. I would do, I'm from New England, so I would do adventures for that circuit. And then I kind of dropped off a little bit during COVID and started running Star Trek with a group of friends. And we were using Tabletop Simulator on Steam to run our games. And I was putting screenshots up in the community. And Michael here happened to be having a panel discussing how to GM and what it's like, coming from another game to Star Trek Adventures. And Jim Johnson, the project manager, happened to be on that panel, and he liked what I was saying, I guess, because within 2 weeks he reached out to me to do a project. So that's kind of how we got started. And Michael and I, we both basically started at the exact same time on the line, about halfway through the line's history, I think, because we're talking about 8 years this game's been going on, which is pretty huge.
Yeah, why don't we actually start there really quick? So Star Trek Adventures, it's a 2D system, and it is in the IP of Star Trek. Can you talk a little bit just about the background if folks don't really know what that system is? It's, to be fair, a great system. The second edition is awesome, and I've been sort of looking through. It's also not like priced at a point where people couldn't pick it up and just like give it a try. So for folks who might be interested, give us a little bit of a designer or a writer's pitch on like, what is this system? What can people expect out of it? What does the 2D system feel like to play?
Yeah. So there's probably, I think, about 10 different games from Modiphius that use the 2D20 system. So if anybody's played the Dune role-playing game or the Fallout role-playing game, the old Conan role-playing game, they all use the 2D20 system. Now, it's modified for each game to get the feel for whatever the setting is or the IP is. And essentially, it's a game where you have two stats that you push together, you form a target number, and you want to roll at or below that number. Mm-hmm. And you always start with 2d20, but there are meta currencies known as momentum and threat. And if you earn momentum, you can add dice to your pool, and you can get up to like 5 dice at a time. But that momentum and threat, like meta currency, it's always going back and forth between the players and the GM. And the GM can use that threat to like do cool narrative stuff, like making complications or making things more challenging and things like that. So
yeah, I like to think of momentum and threat as the tug of war between the players and the GM to control the narrative, in each for their own benefit, right? The players for their player characters and the game master for the NPCs. You were mentioning about the price point on it. I like to remind people that for the price of 10 Starbucks coffees, which is probably what a lot of people take in a month, if not more, for the cost of 10 Starbucks coffees, they could have a lifetime of fun with just the core rulebook. And I think that's the price of one movie now. Also, if you go to the movies and get food and stuff, so and you're limited to 2 hours of fun. So the price point to me is most people can find a way to make it affordable, and again, it's going to be endless fun. You control the narrative, which is really cool.
The one thing that I love about the system is that words on your page have meaning. It's not just about the numbers, it's also about the words. So in Star Trek Adventure specifically, you have focuses, you have pastimes, and you have values. Your focuses and pastimes, if they ever apply to a situation you're in, they basically improve your critical range. And values are like who you are as a person, and you can either play to those values to get benefits, or you can challenge those values and get benefits as well. So if you get into a situation where you're like, this value of mine doesn't apply here, you can actually get rid of that value altogether to get some benefits, which is kind of cool.
Yeah,
that is cool.
Oh,
sorry. Keep going, Michael.
No, I was just gonna say my favorite part of the game is traits. Traits are something again you can spend momentum on in order to affect the game and add stuff. It could be simple as having a bat left. That could be your trait, or it could be a psychological warfare tactic that you know that you're taking into social combat. So traits to me, especially in second edition, are the creme de la creme of the game.
Yeah, it's just what you all are talking about really reminds me of a panel on game design that I attended at PAX Unplugged. It was all about sort of the different levers and how you want the lever that the player pulls the most to be fun, but not like breaking, essentially, so that they can pull it all the time, right? Because you want people to have a lot of fun. And I love when folks design into their games a mechanical way for the GM to sort of have that tug of war like you were talking about. So it doesn't just feel like, oh, the GM's being mean to us or whatever, but it's like, no, this threat level is huge. It's like, this is going to be exciting, and the players kind of know. And it's also like, kind of tipping the hat a little bit so the players don't feel, this came out of nowhere. It's like, we did have a really high threat.
Right.
So
yeah, there are some. I mean, and when you are coming from a world of 5e and Pathfinder and Starfinder and things like that, where there is a lot of like skirmishes and people brag about TPKs and things like that. This system really rewards you for co-storytelling, so that like the characters add to threat because their character is being sloppy, or they're going balls to the wall, or you know what I mean? Like so based off of narratively how you're describing your actions, you could use momentum, or it oftentimes makes more sense to use threat. And that's a really hard thing for new players to figure out and to accept, that this isn't me trying to kill you. I'm going to put you through hell because that's how you show the most character growth, right?
Yeah. Right.
But these are the mechanics, and you're giving me threat, so I'm going to use it to push you to your limit.
Yeah, and I always encourage the game masters to use the threat in a way you're not out to kill the characters. Star Trek Adventures does provide for plot character immunity in the plot. They're pretty much going to make it to the end of the episode, but if they're spending that threat, say to jump over a ravine, I'm going to use 2 of those threats. They only got 1 handhold. That will be a complication I give them as 1 handhold, so it may slow them down a little bit, may force them to have to exert themselves to get over up that cliff. But as game masters, I love it when they spin threat, because I'm like, okay, what broke while they were trying to do this?
Yeah, it really reminds me of the yes but not quite sort of rule as a GM, where you're like, yes, you did it, but this thing is also going wrong. It's like the most interesting place to keep players, which I think is great that it's like in the system to do that, right? But one thing that I want to talk about as well, Al and I were chatting a little bit before we turned on the mic, and he was telling me how, like, you know, the game, since you're Federation employees, I guess, or citizens, like you are top tier, you are high level from the get-go, like you feel beefy. So can you talk a little bit about how the game functions with these characters that have a lot of these abilities and are very capable right away?
Yeah, I mean, most of the people are coming out of Starfleet Academy, right? And in Starfleet Academy, you have to hit one of the 6 main courses, which is command, con, engineering, science, security, or medicine. You have some, maybe you only did it for a year, or maybe you did it the full 4 years plus some. So, you know, even the captain can use a medical tricorder to figure stuff out. Even if the con officer dies, the science officer can take the helm. We saw that happen in Star Trek Deep Space Nine with, you know, Dax was always flying the thing. So she obviously had high science plus con abilities, right? So you're considered a advanced university graduate who's well-rounded. Even if you come from a different polity, think about this, like Klingons or Romulans. Think about it. You're going in space. It's just like our modern astronauts. If you're the last astronaut up there, you know how to read the directions and get stuff done and get back home. You know, we're seeing it happen right now up in space, in the space station. So with that given, the character development is more about showing off your advanced skills and how rounded you are, and more about also your personality development than it is about, you know, min-maxing.
Yeah, I think like one of the things that we talk about is, you know, at the end of an adventure, instead of leveling up, you level sideways. Like your character shifts in what their focuses are. They shift in what their training is. They shift in, you know, what do they become experts on? So like, for example, my character, I play in a game that Michael Dismuke is a GM of, and my character was the helmsman, like, you know, top notch, you know, perfect helm score and whatnot. Disappeared on a planet for 5 years in a time bubble, essentially, comes back, and now he's kind of lost all those skills because he's shifted more towards survival and security and protection. And so, like, my character isn't any stronger. My character is just different, right? And that's what we see over Star Trek. So earlier, Nick, you were mentioning about the Fallout game feels very much like you're playing the Fallout video game. Well, Star Trek Adventures also feels like you are playing through an episode of Star Trek.
Yeah.
Like it's almost like an episode simulator. And and I think that like that's the part that really the system grasps more than anything.
Yeah, why don't we talk a little bit about that? Because this is the thing that I'm like the most interested in when it comes to your jobs as well, of like, how do you build that feeling into your writing when you are designing out what to put into the game book? Like, what are you doing when you're trying to capture that feel of an episode of Star Trek that, you know, a GM can replicate and make new and interesting over and over again? So like, how do you go about that? Because when a lot of people have trouble with that when they're starting with like a brand new IP that they're creating. So how do you do that when you're kind of taking the feel that has been established by somebody else?
Well, for me, for someone who's probably watched every single Star Trek episode a minimum of twice, and in my case of my favorite series and movies, like 5 to 10 times, I got into the habit early on of, now I'm in the point of taking notes, like, oh, that's a new mechanic. Oh, how would that work in the 2D20 system? Oh, what's that technology like, and how would that affect, you know? So for me, I'm trying to develop mechanics around storytelling. So I was the lead writer on Captain's Log, which is the first solo RPG, I think, for any major IP that Modiphius was bold enough to do. It's doing really well. And I remember as I was building a lot, because you're journaling as you go with solo RPG, I was really focused on what are the mechanics for storytelling and how do we wrap that into a dice system.
Yeah.
So that's how I think now. I'm really mixing. Nathan Dowdell, who's the game designer for 2D20, he says RPG has hit its perfect spot when you have a mix of mechanics and story. Yeah. And so that's what I'm thinking when I'm now, if sadly, when I'm watching almost any TV show, not at this point.
you created a love of a new hobby and kind of destroyed an old hobby.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, so, and let's face it, so just like any major IP, there are tropes that they focus on sometimes more than others. There are plots that they sometimes focus on more than others. So when we are designing stories like adventures and things like that, we try to hit those tropes, but also put a spin on them, or look at them through a different lens, and so on and so forth. We also, we try to follow the plot mountain, and we always give pointers along the way for game masters saying, hey, maybe don't spend all your threat here in the first act, because you're going to need it later on to do something big and epic. So, I think that we, of course, watching so much Star Trek and knowing that what those beats typically are, sometimes we'll embrace them, and then sometimes we want to spin them on their head as well.
I love what Al said about tropes too. So it's most Star Trek episodes have a minimum of 2 tropes, and some of them could be, for instance, like sensors can do anything until they can't, or the universal translator works until it doesn't. You know, so we like. That's the key for me. Anyone playing any Star Trek game, and we have one of the books called Lower Decks that I actually wrote what those tropes are. Just you could put someone into a Wild West setting, but grab 2 of those tropes, and that really is a game mechanic that's fun to work with too.
I really love that idea of the until it doesn't kind of thing being the trope, because it is so true. I'm a huge Voyager fan. That was when I was growing up, my favorite to watch with family. Though my grandmother and mom really liked Picard, as we all do. But that was their favorites. But one thing that happens all the time is sort of like you said, they're in the holodeck, and then the holodeck is it's not letting us out. So it's grab the trope. It's great. It's perfect.
It works until it doesn't.
Exactly. Right. But Michael, when you were talking about watching and finding these things that are happening and saying oh, that's a mechanic, what kind of translation process are you using to put it into the game after that? And if there's an example, feel free. But I know I'm putting you on the spot there. So
it's sad to say I can talk about Star Trek and RPG all day. I'm well cataloged. So we just had the technical guide release on March 12th. And one of the sections I was able to write was about the universal translator. And I always was thinking, well, sometimes they meet a species that it doesn't work for. So I went back and looked up lingua code back in the Star Trek technical manual in 1980, blah, blah, whatever that was, 1991 maybe. And I said, well, how can I figure out how it works? And what I did is I created a roll table that when you are in first contact and you meet a new species, you actually have to roll on the roll table to determine how difficult it is for the universal translator to do its work. And if it doesn't work, if you get a failure on that, you now have to go to what's called an extended task. And now you have to lean on your science officers in order to take time to work with this species, and hope while you're doing that, you don't roll a complication like you've accidentally proposed to the Queen Mother. You know what I mean? Yeah. So that's when I'm looking at that. Okay, how do they get this to work? Well, let's build it into mechanics so players can experience that, event we see happen on the TV shows.
Yeah, I really love.
Go ahead. Keep going. Good. No, you go, Nick.
I was just going to say, I love the idea that you're sort of also taking those and you're adding in sort of an element of random, chance to it, so that it doesn't feel stale. It's going to is this going to happen? Are we going to have to do this in a kind of circuitous way, or are we going to just be able to talk to these people?
Right. If they rolled easy on it and all of a sudden, the person comes on screen and they're speaking the same language, they're whew, this won't be an issue, but then all of a sudden it's just a language gibbly, wiggly, and lights flashing. It's oh, you're screwed.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So I was going to say, when the Utopia Planitia guide came out, which is basically our Starship book, one of the things that I was tasked with was going through and doing weapons and such. And so I knew that there was a system that already existed for how weapons work in the game. And now I needed to go through and see the different types of energy weapons that these ships have, different types of torpedoes, different types of mines, and make them all feel different because they technically do different things when they hit the bad guys, right? So that was like such a fun experience, was to go through and to make each one of these things a little bit different, and just tweaking a few, like you said, the levers that we were saying on the weapons. And then of course, as we get later in the timeline, the weapons become more powerful. So now they're dealing more damage and things like that. So that was a fun process to do. That was actually the first time I actually like really started messing around with the mechanics of the game, and Nathan Dowdell gave me the thumbs up. So I was doing the right thing, which it felt good. So it's a lot of fun to see how it can transport into the role-playing game. Sometimes it's not clean, and you got to kind of just brush it away and say, okay, well, this is just going to be a trait then, or something like that. So
one thing about that too is two questions kind of came out of that. One, thank you so much for doing that work, because there's nothing I hate more in a TTRPG when like a dagger and a short sword and a maul basically feel the same. Like maybe you're rolling different dice, but they're completely the same mechanically. It's like, no, those are different things, and like you're using them differently. So thank you for doing that work. That's amazing. The second thing I wanted to ask is that like going back to these tropes, like one of the big tropes of Star Trek is like you got these super high tech folks going down onto a planet that is still in the Stone Age or whatever. The phaser gets smashed by a rock and now they're, with spears running around. So like, how did you consider that stuff too? Did you have to design all of those elements, or is that more up to the GM to kind of adjudicate as they go?
There's ways to do it. So we spoke about when you roll a complication die, and there can be a complication range that's more difficult in certain circumstances. I mean, it can go range from 16 to 20, so that anytime a player rolls a 16 to 20, the game master can inflict a complication like phaser smashed, slip butterfingers, and tricorder slips into crevasse.
Yeah.
So that's one way. Again, narratively, what I'm trying to do, how I use the mechanics, I want to pace the game for my players. I don't want it to drag on. So it's dragging on. I'm not going to contest too much or throw threat or complications against them. If they're moving too fast, faster than my plot, that's where I'm spending my threat to slow them down. So, and that could be done with complications or with traits like dense fog 3, potency 3, where now all their rolls are three times more are 3 points more difficult. Yeah. So this game actually, we design around that and tell the game master, especially if you have the group split up and someone's moving too fast over here, slow them down, spend your threat and comps over there. So the game has a lot of flexibility. I mean, I'm not going to lie. My people have beat my game pretty quick once because they just had a night of amazing rolls. So then I just
but that's every game, right?
Yeah. So then I just focus on B plot, and then there's other times where they have horrible rolls, and as a GM, I let things pass. I'm like, you know what? Succeed at cost. There's an actual succeed at cost mechanic so that you can just give them a win, but they have to take a complication. So the game does balance for that.
That's great. Yeah. Have either of you ever played 10 Candles?
Not yet. I own it. It's over there on the shelf.
It's a fantastic game, and if it works the way that probability is meaning it to work, it will have a great time in like a 2 to 3 hour session, fully complete, amazing. It's a very fun system. But like you were saying around just like dice rolls not wanting to tell the story that you're planning on telling, sometimes you'll get in the middle of that section and then the players just start rolling really well. And you're like, I have to stretch out act 2 of a horror movie. This is the worst thing ever. So it's a problem in all systems. But one thing I'm really interested to ask you too as well is, and we kind of started broaching this topic around storytelling, is how do you get it? Because a lot of game masters, while a lot of them write and a lot of them consume a lot of media, a lot of them are not, screenwriters and are not novelists or whatever. So how as like designers are you building in something so that they can have that really satisfying arc where it feels, like you said, like an episode of Star Trek? Like they can be like, oh, I recognize, like the players are like, I recognize this. That was really cool. How do you go about doing that in an IP that isn't your own?
So I think real quick, Michael, I'm just going to go back to the value system. One of the, like what we mentioned earlier about how you don't level up, you level sideways. Well, if you as a player, are are playing to a value or challenging a value. And then later on, a couple episodes later, if that comes back, you can get additional benefits from that. And so that's almost like the completion of a story arc. In fact, the game actually encourages you as a player to keep a log of what happened after each episode. And then in that log, make sure you make a note of which values you either played to or challenged. And so that way once you complete the arc, that's when you can start making some changes to your character and beefing up some scores and things like that. So that's from the player perspective. I know Michael can tell you from the GM perspective.
Well, I wanted actually clarification on Nick's question.
Yeah,
were you
please.
asking about if someone is designing their own game?
Yes, sorry, that was probably confusing.
Okay.
Like if a GM is like, I'm sitting down tonight, I'm running a 3-hour session or whatever, or I'm starting into this next episode.
Yeah.
How have you kind of gone about making it so that they can actually plan out an episode of Star Trek, or at least be in the best possible position to provide that experience for their table?
Got it. I encourage people to look at the pre-done mission modules, or even we have free mission briefs that you can download at Modiphius or Drive Through RPG. And the reason why is because each one shows you the act structure and the conclusion. How I build them, and I encourage game masters to use this one method of building RPGs, and I want to separate RPGs from building stories, because the thing is, building the story is a collaborative exercise with the players. You cannot railroad them. So do not be committed to your ending, because players never cooperate, right? So I want to separate building a story. When I'm building an RPG, I write the conclusion first. This is my style, because what I say is, by the end of this story, the characters would have learned this, experienced this, blah, blah, blah. I'm not going to say by the end of the story, so-and-so will know exactly this, because that's railroading, right? Yeah. So I start at the end, and then from there, I build what I call 3 brick walls. I'm like, in order for them to learn that, they have to get through this, and through this. I call those, they call them in the beats, beat 1, beat 2. These are the 3 major beats. So I encourage the game master to start with what you want them to learn, what they're discovering, what they're uncovering, and then what are the 3 obstacles to get them there. And that's your acts. That's how I start, basically.
Yeah, that's a great idea.
Michael, we came on board when we first started writing for the line. We did a game master guide, and it's very different than a typical game master guide that you would see for like Dungeons and Dragons. And actually, the new D&D one is actually much, much better than the original one. But it does go in there, and it talks about inciting events, right? Like start with some type of cold opens, like do a cold open, have an inciting event, and then do your 3 acts, right? And try to get to a climax by the end of Act 2, and let Act 3 be your resolution. And so we talk about that in both the Game Master's Guide and in the Captain's Log solo game. So it literally tells you, like, step by step by step what should be happening. And in some cases, we even give you random tables to roll for ideas of what should be happening during.
Well, and for instance, one of the biggest rules I tell game masters to do, or storytellers, between Act 1 is where they discover the scope of the problem. So that's brick wall number 1. Act 2 is where I completely complicate their lives and everything goes wrong that can go wrong. And Act 3 is them getting out of it. At me as a GM, I sit back and I'm like, you guys figure it out. and that's a simple rule I do for constructing games too. So Act 3 is maybe a little bit more discovery and stuff like that. But by, like in a normal storytelling, the hero's journey, by the end of Act 2, some mentor or some solution should have arrived. Their Obi-Wan Kenobi, in a sense, to give them that little thing they need in order to get and succeed through Act 3.
Yeah. And Al, I want to also talk, because Michael brings up a great point, that you can't railroad players. Players are going to do what they're going to do. How does that interaction work in the design, and how did you go about thinking about this as you were writing, when it comes to how players interact with the GMs and how they can voice their part of the story as well? Like how did you kind of go about that?
So when we are writing pre-written adventures and things like that, we specifically provide options We try not to set it up as this happens, then this happens, then this happens. We're like, here's the event. Here are some scenarios that could happen. And of course, if your players come up with a different idea, and they can scientifically explain why it might work, sure, roll with it. Like, it's Star Trek. They make up half the words they say anyways. So
Yeah.
and the big thing that we talk about along the way is if it's something that the characters are really involved with and into, try to embrace that, right? And we encourage that, in the Game Master Guide, especially, we talk about being a fan of your players, and letting them be awesome, and so, like, we specifically have put that into the game, especially the let them be awesome part, because they're Starfleet.
We really write that into it. I remember there was one book, I think it was the Captain's Log, where we gave as an example, like subspace. There's subspace rivers. There's subspace sandbars. There's subspace whirlpools. There's subspace crawfish. You would let them, for instance, if one of the characters is good with aquariums, say, hey, somehow your aquarium will apply to this time, and you let them come up with a subspace coral reef, and let them explain how it works. That's Star Trek. I love it. I call it the Tom Paris effect, because he's always like, do you mean it's like a this? And they're like, yeah, it's just like that. So I think the biggest thing with RPG is let your players have fun and get super creative. Once they learn, oh, I can do this, game over. I mean, you're going to just have so many fun campaigns after that.
Yeah.
Now, letting them have fun and letting them get off easy are two different things.
Two different things. No, two different.
I was like, I will break you.
No, and we have trust conversations too. I have trust conversations. I'm like, do you guys trust me? Because I'm going to really mess you up in Act 1. And they're like, yeah, we trust you. So you do, but that makes them feel even so much more victorious in Act 3 when they
like if you think about all the characters we love throughout literature and film, right? The ones who go through the most hell are the ones we love the most. Like, I think Tyrion Lannister from Game of Thrones, he has gone through a lot, and he's one of the coolest characters, in the series. So, and we do try to encourage that. Like, we want you to challenge your players. But again, don't go out trying to, just kill them right off the bat. You know what I mean? And that, again, we've written all of that into the miscellaneous books. I mean, we've got, 20 something hardcover books at this point. So, 8 years worth. And one of the things that is kind of challenging is that we have 1E and 2E. They're basically the exact same game.
Yeah.
But there was a large debate for a while within the community of, do we move to 2E? Do we move to 1E? Are you going to reprint the 1E stuff as 2E stuff and whatnot? And so, like, that is something we said, we are in 2E now. This is what we're producing content for. But if you want to play with the 1E rules, go nuts. Like, that's awesome.
Yeah, I mean, that's going back to what Michael was saying. Like, you buy the book once and you can use it forever.
Yeah.
I've never understood the folks that are like, 4E came out and now 3.5 is not used, blah, blah, blah. It's like, just play 3.5.
Right.
And the thing is, the evolution of 2E was actually, predominantly fan driven because of things that Modiphius saw over 8 years, suggestions, homegrown rules, people saying this doesn't quite work. What about this? And Jim Johnson listens, and Nathan Dowdell listen. And so I was really happy when we did 2E, because basically, wouldn't you agree, Al? Like, for us, 2E, except maybe for a couple mechanics where it was an easy transition because we had already adapted our game to be that fluidic, as 2E is.
Yeah, and one of the things that I would do, Nick, and I know that you're on board with this too, because I've heard it on a couple of your shows talking about it, is the accessibility of being able to read the content and understand what's on the page, right?
Yeah.
So the 1E book, core rule book, while it's still fascinating, it's got great stuff in it. It is hard to find information, right? And so with 2E, we started presenting stuff as like flowcharts, and a lot more tables, and a lot more, like breaks in the text, so that people who are coming into the game can access it a lot more easily than they did 1E. And I think that we've seen that. I mean, I think they just announced that Star Trek was the 7th best role-playing game this past year.
Well, that and we've
dropped. So that's pretty cool.
And,
it's never been on that
10,
list
baby.
before.
And we've got some really good feedback, even from people like the great GM Guy Schlanders, as I pronounce it. And he was not a big fan of 1E and 2E. He says it's in logical order. Finally, it's how it needed. So those we. Jim and Nate love fan feedback. They respond to almost everything.
Yeah.
So I know I'm selfish. The reason I want it to be an amazing game and the reason I write so passionately for it is because I hate it when my RPGs stop producing and then I only have my fan made content. So selfishly, I'm trying to really push this to last, 15, 20 years more.
Yeah. Right. I mean, why not? You're like, hey, I made this investment. I would love to keep like having these new stuff, the new stuff come out. One thing that I'm fascinated by too is that, like you were saying, these characters, they're gonna make it through because that's what Star Trek is. The core characters, the players, are gonna kind of be there from Act 1 to Act 3, and then in the next episodes, etc. However, Star Trek is also full of like red shirts being killed and stuff like that. How do you have like stakes like that, and like how do you use them in the game? Yeah.
Totally. It's a great mechanic too, because I use it quite a bit, especially this season. Have you noticed, Al? I've been killing off our red shirt
supporting cast.
So basically, since they're considered supporting characters, there's a mechanic in the game that the supporting character can take the hit for the main character, and in that case, they might die. But if I need to also do some Act 2 scare them, I go ahead and toss down threat, and you can do what's called a reversal. You can spend 1 point of threat per active player in the scene, and you can do pretty much whatever you want except kill them. You can put them in prison. You could change it where something knocks them out. They wake up in a Romulan holding cell. So I'll use that now to really up the stakes and be like, oh, okay, this is a serious game. We just lost our science. We just lost the supporting science officer, which is which you need to have in Star Trek. One person, like Voyager, they started with 141 people and finished with 150. I don't know how that happens because they had so many people die.
So, yeah.
Well, I do want to talk a little bit more about that supporting character mechanic for a minute. So, unlike a lot of games, this Star Trek Adventures game almost encourages you to split into multiple groups. Right. The doctor is often in the sick bay. You often have an away team down on the planet. You often have a bridge crew. Right. So what the supporting characters mechanic does is it allows a player to control a character in a scene that their main character isn't in. So if I'm on the away team on the planet and there's stuff going on the bridge, I can have a supporting character on the bridge that I can also role play. And those supporting characters, as you travel through your stories and whatnot, and we're 5 seasons in our Star Trek campaign, those characters start becoming very developed. And we have we have a database of like who our supporting characters are.
We have like 90.
And when one of them dies, we feel it. Like we feel it as though it's one of us, because it's someone that we've role played before. So
I like to call it the O'Brien effect, because he showed up so minimally in TNG and then he creeps over to DS9 and becomes the major character, right?
Yes.
So we want O'Briens on our crew, and believe me, again, story-wise, there's nothing better off than killing off an O'Brien. TNG O'Brien, not DS9 O'Brien. He had fought immunity by DS9. But if you like, we just had again, one of our characters was since season 1 and much beloved, and I needed to wake them up, and she lost her life, and they were like, oh wow, it really hit them hard, which is good. Yeah.
Do you have any sort of like you said, you've been 5 seasons in your campaign? Is there like a way, like again, my main reference point is Voyager, because that was the one that I saw every episode from start to finish, multiple times. But they have points where like certain characters, even main characters, will be like, hey, this isn't going to work unless I let myself be taken by the Borg, and like you're going to have to come get me essentially. Are you able to do that in the game as well by having that sort of split like you were talking about, Al? There you can run the game with the party split like that, but how do you go about having like those major threats that are sort of like continuity shifting? You know what I mean?
Yeah, with player permission and planning, we will let them exit out a main character. We've had our chief medical officer die in battle, bravely, of course, because we wanted to write it that way. And we had our Bajoran science officer go off to be with the prophets. Nice. So again, my rule is you don't kill off a main character without permission. So it has to have some sort of big narrative punch.
Yeah, and my character, like I said, got stuck on that planet for 5 years. So that was an entire season of the show where like everybody thought I was dead because I started role playing another main character. And then
turns out the actor was just in contract negotiations.
That's what happened.
And then so I came back for the season finale with that main character, and it was
they shed
really
tears.
Cool scene.
Yeah,
that cool. Everybody got really teared up on.
It was a 2-year left moment. Like Avengers Endgame, it was one of those on your left moments.
Yeah.
What about and I promise I'll stop just being like, what about this little thing? But I'm just so interested, so curious about how you guys did a great job at pulling all of this into the game. But like you have characters in the show, like Will Wheaton's character, where Red Shirt should have died 1,000 times, did not die. Can characters play sort of as that, like maybe even start a game as sort of like a Red Shirt and then sort of move their way into like a place of prominence within the crew?
Oh yeah,
that's dope. For the listeners, they are both shaking their heads. Yes.
Al, go ahead. Do you want?
So advancement obviously takes time, right? But we have rules in the game for playing a child character.
Cool.
We have rules in the game for playing a character who is not Starfleet but serving on a Starfleet ship in some other role. And so like those two options immediately start that arc, right, where you're playing to become a member of the crew. And then typically over the course of a season or a show, you might see someone advance in rank two times, rarely 3 times. So basically that's all about talking to your game master about what do you want to do with your character? Are they someone that's seeking advancement? And Michael actually wrote a whole section in the Lower Decks book about career pathing as well, which is cool.
I did the HR piece.
It was
the HR piece.
Yeah, because I'm
amazing.
Starfleet's obviously a lot of HR diplomacy. So I wrote the whole section about HR, like how do you career path if you're a lower decker? How do you move up the ranks? And build some game mechanics in for that. I mean, just to give an example, on ours, we have an ensign who's now a lieutenant, and then I think you started as a lieutenant JG, and now you're commander, right? Yeah. So commander, and how I decide that too is if something big happens, like if they save the universe, that to me is like an instant bump up. Starfleet's going to say you're all bumped up, right? And so we have had at least 2 universe ending scenarios. We're working on our 3rd right now. So.
Amazing.
So that Lower Decks book allows you to just play a group of lower. So like the core rulebook kind of assumes that you're playing on the bridge. You're playing the bridge crew of the ship. But in that Lower Decks book, we very much wanted to show that you can play ensigns and what that life is like. And interestingly, in that scenario, instead of having supporting characters that are kind of in the background, you have supervising characters that you can then take control of. So like, if you're on an away mission to go clean some biofilters on some podunk planet, if on the ship you could play a supervising character if you wish.
Right.
That's right.
And contrasting that, just the game that Al took the lead in writing, which was Federation Klingon War, you can play Admiralty also. So you can be at the space stations you can be Starfleet Command and you're running fleet maneuvers. So
that's really cool.
The game, we literally built it so you can play solo by yourself. You can then port your solo character back into the group setting, whether it's lower decks level all the way up to Admiralty. So we've really, I'm proud to say, over these years, scoped out so you can do whatever you want. Like whatever is a sweet spot for you, we got you.
This is one thing that I'm like fascinated by in a ton of TTRPGs, and I want to kind of get both of your takes on it. Like one of my favorite TTRPGs ever is Monster of the Week, another sort of TV sort of based one where you're sort of trying to hit that narrative arc. So fun, but like most of the time in my games, I just kind of house rule, like, let's not play the chosen, let's not play like certain characters that are like the main character, because I want everyone to feel like this is an ensemble game that we're all working on together. All Star Trek ships are hierarchies, because there's the captain all the way down to the ensigns, everything like that. How do you go about working in this setting and when you're writing so that it doesn't feel like worse or feel different or it will feel different, but feel worse mostly to be an ensign versus, the captain, or if like everyone is working on those that, supervisor level, maybe someone's the captain, maybe someone's the engineering lead, all that kind of thing, but they all kind of report to the captain. So how do you make it still feel like an ensemble that everyone matters just as much as the other when they're playing the game?
Yeah. That goes back to where we started the conversation, is we're dealing with a bunch of highly educated people. Just because they don't have the rank, it doesn't mean they don't have the expertise. And I think we've seen that in many Star Trek episodes where you will see Captain Picard defer to the astrophysicist and actually appoint even Wesley Crusher to lead an away team because of his specialty. So really, it's up to build the plot and the scenario wherein everyone gets to shine. That's part of the design of it. But again, I love it when I have a mix mash of characters, even if they're all security officers, and then you start finding out stuff about them. There's even a way in the game to spend what's called a determination point for that session have a talent that you never revealed before. You're like, well, actually, I was into macrame. I wasn't using batleth while I was living on Romulus. So they can come up with a story using a determination point to say, actually, I'm skilled in this. So again, following Star Trek, where you are pleasantly surprised when you find out that Dr. Crusher knows how to dance, or Data can play the violin. It's all in there.
And I can say, from a group perspective, as a group that's coming in to play this game, a group of players, it can sometimes be overwhelming or foreboding to have someone be the captain, right?
Yeah.
And so we do talk about the potential of having the GM be the captain, and just have the players play the bridge crew. I've done that before. My first time playing the game, that's how I did it, because I got more comfortable with it. But I do think that it is a really cool and challenging role-playing experience that for someone to do is to take over and be the captain, because you have to make judgment calls and you have to rely on your experts around you. And during the session 0, of course, you want to talk about who is who is going to be that captain. In fact, in one of my games, we had 3 people interested, and we actually had someone be an admiral that came in and interviewed each of the captains.
That's amazing.
And then they voted. So that was really cool. But I think that don't be hesitant to take on that mantle, but be ready to be flexible when you do, because not all of us are actually great leaders, right? And we're all learning as we're playing. And so, if you're a player and that you're questioning whether the captain is actually being like a captain, that's something that you could bring up in a continuing session 0 with your GM or with the player or whatever. So that's really important to remember as well.
That's amazing. And since we sort of looped back around to what we were talking about at the beginning, I wanted to just say thank you so much, but also give you guys a bunch of time, because Al, you are working on another game, and Michael, you were talking about at the beginning that you're also writing on it. So Al, tell us all about this game, where people can find it, what's new, and then we'll just talk about where people can find both of you and what you're excited about in the future that you can talk about, because Michael has a few NDAs, but
absolutely.
But Al, take it away.
So 3 years ago, Modifius opened up a program called the World Builders Program, and basically that gave everyone the ability to use their game system, their rule set in their own games and sell them on drive-through. I had this idea about these robots that were sent to a planet to terraform it, and they all gained sentience before humanity returned. So I thought that story alone, that pitch right there, would make for a really cool role-playing game, because it allows you to think about like, how do you build a society? What do you do when the humans return? Are the humans going to return? And so on and so forth.
Yeah.
And what I did was I tweaked the Star Trek Adventures system a little bit, in that the core stats are your protocols that you were programmed with when you landed, and you have 6 emotions as stats.
Oh, that's really cool.
Because you're just learning how to control your emotions.
Yeah.
So essentially, the higher you are in an emotion with a stat, the higher your stat is, the better you are using that emotion to control and manage your protocols, right? So instead of saying that it's going to be security plus might, instead I say, well, you can make a surviving test, but how do you feel right now? And they have to like go through and like process what those feelings are, and then that is how they form their dice pool. And let me tell you, the games that I've run of this, the people have the second that they start thinking about that emotions, they're like, this is unlike any experience that we've had before. Because oftentimes in a lot of games, you're just pew pew pewing, trying to get use your abilities, trying to cast these spells, and you don't really think about the emotions that your character is having. And this sentience kind of forces you to do so. And we just did a big Kickstarter. It was pretty successful. We are in the finishing stages of layout right now. The backer kit should be going out next week. Really exciting stuff.
I mean, I need to describe a little bit more, because I don't think people get it. And I didn't get it until I played it. And I was like, oh my God, I've never had an experience like this playing RPG before. So say, for instance, you're a robot who's sentient, is saving its dog that's maybe on the ledge. You could pick, are you fearful and doing this move? Or are you in love? Are you loving and doing this move? So is love motivating you to go for this? Or is it fear? Or is it pride because people are watching, like, I'm not afraid of this, so I'm going to go out on the limb. So you have to actually, so that, to me, this is the first time in a game I was forced to emote in every single move. And that is the most human thing we do. We all, in everything we do, act off of emotion. So every other RPG game I've ever played is about being the coolest, or, get that done. And it's very ego. Ego would be the emotion of most, I think. But this was the first time I played a game where it's like, okay, how is my newly awakened sentient robot feeling? And what's their motivating factor? It's what you want out of good acting and improv, right? Is motivation. So I honestly say this is the most improv game I've ever played. And that's why, I mean, I was all for it when I saw Al. I was like, I have full faith in you, bro. We got this. And, I said, let me write on this, please.
Yeah. Michael produced a full mission in our mission book, and he just finished up 10 adventure briefs, which are basically those one-page stories. I'm really excited to see those, because our layout guy is quickly moving through the process. So. I still want to do more with sentience. I think that there's a lot of potential out there. We will be getting it back up to drive through as soon as we're done with fulfillment.
I'm predicting it becomes a cartoon series on Netflix.
Hey, listen, if you need someone to act in it, let me know.
It's that, like, it's so cute and touching. It really but it could be more than that, but I found it very touching. So
in fact, you guys can see my shirt that I'm wearing. This is my sentience.
Amazing.
That's brilliant.
Into the robot arm.
One thing I just want to say that I'm like, you both sold me on this game. I definitely need to try it out, because one of my biggest in like a D&D or something is what you were talking about, Michael, of that like ego-driven character of like, I'm the cool silent one. And it's like, okay, how do I engage with you? And like, how does the players engage with you? And also as someone who's really story-oriented, like challenging your players to really have an understanding of why they're doing something is like, because the why is really where story comes from. You know what I mean? So if they're, like you said, with the dog on the ledge example, if somebody is doing it for pride, wow, what an interesting choice. Like then you as a GM are like, wow, I can use that for like 3 more sessions. Like what a great way to force your players to just give the GM story beats. Amazing.
Yeah, and the other cool thing that we kept the value system in that Star Trek uses, but we tweaked it a little bit in that. So like if I have a value that like all robots are my family, right? And I am doing something where maybe I'm not the greatest at doing it, I can let my robot side take over, my AI side take over. But in doing so, I have to sacrifice those values from my character and cross them off. And if at any time you don't have any values, you revert to being an AI and you are no longer sentient.
Yeah.
So that's really the only way you can die in the game.
But also, like, what a great story beat there as well. Like, it's like the Wall-E cry your eyes out moment where the like you're like, oh no, he's just a robot again. So wow, really cool. I'm super excited. We're definitely gonna have both of you on again to deep dive into that more.
Yeah, and if you want to get a group together to play, you let me know. I'll run you a session.
Don't offer if you don't mean it, because I will do it.
That's how you got me in.
But I also would really love, you both are incredibly thoughtful and great designers and writers. So like, where can people find you? What are you working on? What do you want to share with people so that they can really get involved with your work and find the stuff you're doing?
Yeah. So I'm GM_Admiral on all the socials. I try to be pretty interactive with the communities. I just turned in my first adventure for Achtung Cthulhu. So I'm really excited about that. There are some other things looming on the horizon that I can't talk about yet. I've got Sentience here, and I've got I also released a storybook fantasy game called Once Upon, and it's using a system of my own design to basically using D12 pools and whatnot. But essentially, you play a storybook character that someone else is reading about,
cool.
and your goal is to do cool stuff so that the readers believe in you, and the more they believe in you, the more powerful you get. So I'm really, really happy with that one. We'll probably go to Kickstarter with that next year as well. So that's where I'm at. GM Admiral on all the socials. And if you're in New England, I'll probably be at a bunch of the cons over the course of the next year as well. So
amazing. And Michael?
Well, you can see my body of work at michaeldismuke.com. That's spelled Dismuke for people who, it's a weird last name. So michaeldismuke.com. That shows my body of work that I'm working on. I have more things coming out this year in 2025. The 2 biggest things I'm working on ever in my life, which I can't talk about. I can tell you that you'll know about them in 2026 and 2027.
Okay.
But stay tuned because, man, I'm so happy right now.
Wow. Well, on that huge cliffhanger, I just want to say thank you all for listening. If you're interested in getting involved with Tabletopped, you can go to tabletopppod.com. We have a contact form there. If you want to see specific guests or want to talk about specific items in TTRPGs, please send those there. Of course, we also have our Patreon, patreon.com/tabletoppt, where you can see the modules we've written, all of the extra episodes that we do, wild magics, things like that. And of course, everyone, thank you for listening and have a great day. We'll see you next Monday. Goodbye. And if I could end the